Joel Embiid is back in the national headlines after an interesting deep dive article on ESPN breaking down what is going on between his eaters there. And one interesting storyline that did emerge across this article was about the snitch that helped derail last year's Sixers season. There's a ton of connections or theorizations that Eric Gordon is the guy, and the veteran spoke up to defend himself a little bit. I want to talk a little bit about what this means from the Sixers perspective, what we know and who leaked the meeting, if we should care, and everything else that does have to do it. So doing to start off with what kind of sparked this here, and of course, an active Sixers Twitter user, Aiden Laporta, here tweeting out, by the way, Eric Gordon was the snitch that leaked stuff that took place inside the Sixers locker room. He also sucks at basketball and shouldn't have a roster spot. Why is he on our team at Daryl Morey? Now, to this point, Eric Gordon himself stepped in the comment section to defend himself, saying, dude talking stupid shit. I'm going on year 18, and that ain't my rep. Get your facts straight. Now, the one thing that I will acknowledge here is this isn't exactly an outright I did not do it in the way that I think if I was in those shoes would probably be my defense there. This is not me actively accusing Eric Gordon directly, but I will say I've had a little birdie tell me it was Eric Gordon as well here. Now, as far as the overall conversation, I do want to start with the why Eric Gordon is back before I reflect on the full context of this situation. There was no way in which Eric Gordon was not returning to the Sixers basketball team. He had a player option, had full control of his destiny, and they managed to work out a little you scratch our backs, we scratch yours by him opting out of the player option and coming back on the veterans minimum. With that exact action there, the Sixers got a little bit salary cap relief where the number went from, I believe it was 3.2, dropped to a little bit over 2 million for what the salary cap number would be. And for Eric Gordon specifically, he went from making 3.5 million to 3.6 million because the salary cap in itself went up there. So there was no way around him returning. This was a mistake by Daryl Morey last offseason. As far as Eric Gordon, his performance on the floor last year certainly was not encouraging. That he played 19.7 points per game, averaged 6.8 points, 1.2 rebounds, 1.7 assists, did shoot 40.9% from beyond the three-point arc, but he's 36 years old, and we all know the kind of the growing sentiment of how many veterans and washed-up players exist on this Sixers roster and how frustrating that has been. So I understand not wanting him back. In an ideal world, I certainly would not either, but I do understand the context of how we got here to this point. Now, as far as the official situation here overall, I do want to start by pulling up the article itself that wrote about this, because some interesting quotes from Joel in particular here. Once again, this coming from the awesome ESPN article. And it writes, weeks after the locker room altercation in November, the Sixers held a closed-door meeting to address the team's calamitous 2-11 start. Details of the meeting leaked the following day. Maxey, who Embiid considers one of his best friends, confronted Embiid about being late for team events and dragging the morale of the group down. Embiid told a reporter, quote, whoever leaked that is a real piece of S. He repeatedly vowed to find the source. Quote, I know who leaked it, Embiid tells me during a late-night phone call after the season ends. You do? Yeah, but I'm not going to. The past is the past, Embiid said. The one thing I'll say is, it's hard being around people that do those sorts of stuff. And the article continues on to say, that goes back to the trust thing. Once you cross that, you can't expect me to be a part of a team meeting again. That's just not going to happen. The way you're talking, it sounds like this person is still around. I said, I don't know, he says. Come on, Joel. You know who's on your team right now, I say, laughing. Free agency just started. I don't know what's going on. So there's a chance that this person may be around next season, I say. No, there's a chance they're still around. This does sound like Eric Gordon to me, because in the same context of what I just set up about the opt-out and then the veterans minimum, there was a little bit of uncertainty there that I don't know what's going on, but the reality is, like, I think this is probably who the guy was. And when I arrive on that conclusion there, it's sort of process of elimination, of look around the rest of the locker room, who would leak that? And to provide a reminder of what the exact leak is, I did want to pull up the Shams Charania article from several months ago to this point. What it writes is, amid a 2-11 start that has them in last place in the Eastern Conference, and with their star trio of Joel Embiid, Paul George, and Tyrese Maxey yet to play a game together, the Philadelphia 76ers held a team meeting following Monday night's 106-89 loss to the Miami Heat. The loss was the team's fourth in a row, sparking veteran guard Kyle Lowry to call for the meeting, a much-needed heart-to-heart and a call to action and urgency, sources told ESPN. Players and coaches held each other accountable and took fault in the start of the season. Maxey challenged Embiid to be on time for team activities, calling out the 2022-23 league MVP about being late, quote, for everything, and how it impacts the locker room from other players to the coaching staff, sources briefed on the meeting told ESPN. Maxey and Embiid have a close friendship and a history of holding each other accountable, according to those around the team. Quote, Tyrese loves big fella, but this is the elephant in the room, a person involved in the meeting told ESPN. players told 76ers coach Nick Nurse they want to be coached harder, and that coaches in turn said they want players to practice with purpose and attention to detail. Embiid accepted the message sent in the meeting, sources said, but he stated that he is sometimes confused about what the 76ers are attempting to execute on the court. Embiid, who was listed as doubtful most of Monday due to an illness, was not seen by most teammates and coaches throughout the day before appearing for warm-ups and playing in the game. Now, obviously, this was still the very early parts of the season before it went as disastrous as it eventually did go on to do, but I think a lot of this is sort of indicative of the entire situation. Now, my biggest problem with this, I do agree with Joel. Like, these kind of things just straight up should not get out, and you'd be shocked how many NBA teams have team meetings like this that nobody hears a peep about, and that's how this exact process should have gone down in Philadelphia. I do think Joel is right to be upset about that. At the same time, him being more upset about the meeting getting out is a little indicative of the entire meeting in itself and the way that he did look at this situation. But I will say that article in its entirety did clear up a bunch about trust with Joel Embiid, how important that is to him and why he's so guarded in handing out that level of trust. There was another interesting anecdote in there about how when he was having a doctor and a trainer over to his house, he used to just leave little piles of $20 bills on his table there, sort of messily put about. And they asked, like, you need to put money away. Somebody's going to go in there and take it. And he's like, I know, I'm not going to miss it. I just want to know who is that kind of guy, who is going to walk in there and take money off the table. And then that'll change the way I look at him. I'm not going to, threaten him over. I'm not going to press him on it. I'm not going to be upset about it. I just want to know if that's the type of guy you are. And I thought that was pretty fascinating and kind of shows a little bit of how he's wired there. And this situation sort of plays into it from the professional standpoint as well. Now, as far as Eric Gordon as a whole, the reason I kind of arrive on him being the guy is simply the process of elimination of who else would it be. I do know for sure that Eric Gordon was miserable last season, as he rightfully should, and I have a hard time being fully critical of his performance on the court because that was a Joel Embiid signing. That Eric Gordon inherently makes a ton more sense as a basketball player if Joel Embiid is on the floor. That him getting catch and shoot three-point looks, that's pretty much the model. That's what you want. Is you're going to threaten teams that if you double Joel Embiid, you're leaving a free kick out to a corner three for Eric Gordon, where he has made a career for a decade plus at this point. Obviously, Embiid was not on the floor, and that took a great portion of the value of what Gordon can provide at this stage in his career here. But when looking around the rest of the options for this locker, for who could have leaked this, and I also want to be clear that this was a direct leak. This was not something that just kind of whispered got out. We have quotes in this article. There's here. Looking around, why would Paul George do this in his first season, within his first 15 games with the team? What does he have to benefit from that? Kyle Lowry, just not that kind of guy. Andre Drummond seems to like Embiid and has been around for quite some time. Tyrese Maxey is one that I think is a little more on the table than people would believe. And for Maxey specifically, I don't think this was anything malicious or anything that I want to make Joel Embiid look bad or I want to look like the superhero here. But the article certainly painted him in super highlight. And the thing that I will note here is the agency angle. Rich Paul of Clutch Sports, Tyrese Maxey's agent, is a guy that will go to whatever lengths to pull whatever strings that he needs to do to put his client in the best situation. And I am sure Rich Paul is plenty cognizant of how off the rails last season went in Philadelphia and has a careful eye cast upon Maxey's future there. So maybe there was a little bit of putting those wheels in motion, but at the same time, I find it unlikely that Maxey would be the guy to step out of the room, call his agent, and tell him what's going on here. I think in general, this was much more normal basketball, just process then goes on. That I think there's a lot of professional sports teams that have these kind of intense closed doors meeting that nobody hears about, but that was not the case with the Sixers. At the end of the day, it doesn't really matter who did leak that. Obviously, the season went sideways, and this meeting did not fix that whatsoever. I think that it was interesting to hear Joel still being a little bit dug in on this, and I do arrive to the conclusion that it is Eric Gordon here. And the last note that I will make on that overall is December 15th. December 15th is the date that Eric Gordon will be eligible to be traded. And an additional note on that is, it seems like with the new CBA that when you have a certain years of service, that all these guys on the tail end of their career are getting these no trade clauses, which essentially gives the player a bit more control, that you can say you have the option to say, I'm not accepting that trade destination, or I want to stay at the team that I'm at. Eric Gordon completely waived that on his contract there. So I do think that was a little noteworthy. And I think the expectation from my perspective is certainly that as soon as he can legally be traded, both sides probably work together on that. But this is the boat that he's in right right now. Got to get that paycheck. Got to make sure that is on the books. And then we'll see who ultimately is paying the end of it at the tail end of the season. But nonetheless, do encourage you guys to check out that article once again. I also dropped a little bit of my own thoughts on it on Crossing Broad. I titled it, I Will Always Appreciate Joel Embiid. So do encourage you guys to check that out as well. But appreciate each and every one of you guys for tuning into this video here. If you have not already, make sure you're smashing that subscribe button, dropping a like on this video, giving your thoughts in the comments section. I'll be back talking to you next time right here on Sixers Digest. Peace.